Everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to having Jotham Stein again. Jotham, you were here in September. It was great having you. You're the CEO and of law offices of Jotham Stein. You're also the author of a book, which I love the title, Negotiate Like a CEO. I have a keynote and a big training I do that I do all over the country called Think Like a CEO, empowering people to really take ownership of any position that they're in. And so let's talk about negotiating like a CEO and just the level of ownership that, that you need to even have the confidence to think like a CEO when you're not a CEO.
Well, the concept is if you're going to think like a CEO and you're going to negotiate like a CEO, you want to understand the field that you're playing in. You want to understand the people around you, and you want to understand what your goals are, set them, and pursue them. And so why is my book titled Negotiate Like a CEO? And I suspect yours and your coaching, Think Like a CEO, is because what do CEOs do when they're going into a company? The first thing they do is negotiate their protection, their severance on day one. Even though every CEO I know thinks that they're going to make the company the best thing since sliced bread, and grow it, they know things can go wrong. And so they're thinking about their exit even on day one, because they're thinking about a road plan, a roadmap, and people around them. They want things to go well. They want to bring a team in to go well, just as somebody who's not a CEO wants to think, how am I going to improve? What's the arc of my career? But they also know that lots of things happen in life, lots of things happen in business. Sometimes they don't go well. Sometimes, like you say, you get stuck and they don't find John around, and they still get stuck for a while, and it's too long, and they have to go to another company to get unstuck. Yeah. So lots of things happen, and that's the message of my book is, if you have any leverage at all, certainly as an employee, regardless of the level you're at, or as an entrepreneur, absolutely protect yourself on day one. We all hope things go well, but sometimes they don't. So you're protecting your downside.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Let's talk about the art of negotiation and some tips for people to negotiate. Kind of as you get ready to negotiate, while you're negotiating, and then post-negotiation. I think negotiation is something that many people want to get better at, but they don't necessarily study it. Years ago, I read a book, You Can Negotiate Anything by Herb Cohen. We may have talked about it last time you were on the show, but I loved the book. And I'll share again, I got a great tip from it. If you're on a call and you lose control, hang up on yourself talking. And I've used it 3 or 4 times, and it's been really beneficial for me. And so what are let's just start with before you negotiate. What are some things that people can really kind of, how do you get into the right mindset? How do you get ready to negotiate?
Well, there's multiple things you need to do. One is to figure out what your goals are yourself and what you want out of the negotiation. All right. That's very important, so that you can have your own roadmap, a decision tree. If the other side says A, or the group of other sides, whoever's out there says A, I do B. If they say C, I do D. All right, that's just the beginning, though. You want to try to figure out what the other players at the table want, how they're protecting themselves against you or your company, and what they're looking for. So you want to know what the playing field is, that is their goals, but also the personalities. You want to also understand your personality, because some people are better negotiators than others starting out. But many people, even though they feel it's outside their comfort zone, with a little help, either internal help or help like a coach like you are, can be very good negotiators. Yeah. And I want to say very, very, very clearly, and I think I talked about this last time on your show, if you're not the best negotiator out there, somebody in your community is not the best negotiator out there, doesn't feel that comfortable, then assess that, realize it, and then do your best to fix it. And whether that's seeing you, John, as a coach, or reading books, or finding others to help them, even the wise and old individual, you want to be outside your comfort zone if you're not part of you to negotiate, not part of who you are. You feel why is that? Because the other side is probably not making their best offer, whatever the other side is, on day one, on the first offer. They anticipate negotiating, and if you don't protect yourself. You don't negotiate for yourself. You don't try to maximize your personal return in a individual negotiation, whether it's for your company, if you're an entrepreneur starting out your company, or whether it's as an employee. If you don't do that, the other side has an advantage, right?
Yeah.
They're keeping what they would be negotiating to give you in the negotiation. I'd say it's also incredibly important for entrepreneurs out there who are starting their own company, whether it's a one-person company or whether you plan to take in very serious outside investment from venture capitalists or private equity principals and go public or sell. You need to protect yourself from day one. And one thing I did mention is if you're going to be signing documents, in terms of the question you just asked me, what you should do to prepare. If you're signing documents, you need to read every one of those documents. And not only that, if you don't have sensitivity for it, like if you're a great chip designer or you're a great somebody in retail or marketing and that's the company you're building, get somebody to help you because sometimes those documents can kill you. And you sign them maybe on day one when everybody thinks it's going to go well. And then year one, it's great. And year two, it's great. And then they come back to haunt you on year three.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're a bad person if you sign a bad document. It's sometimes you just don't know even the English words that are there. If you haven't had the experience before, get somebody to help you. Just as I said, get somebody to help you if you do a self-assessment and negotiation isn't your strong point. Get somebody to help you to make it your strong point.
Yeah. I love it. Reaching out to your resources. And, Jotham, one of the things I see a lot in my world is people having a really hard time asking for help. And like you said, the way even a sentence sometimes is formed in a contract is very confusing. You think it means one thing and it maybe needs another. It means another. So I love, so to me, think community, I'm a big fan of you have an attorney and there's a lot of attorneys you can use. Your current attorney, if you need another reference, you can, reach out to Jotham, so he, it's really, really important. Let's talk about, during the negotiation, when things get heated, right? When you are, in a negotiation and, it's getting to the point where you're starting to get into maybe fight or flight or lose your grounding and, it's alive. How does that work?
Well, okay. So now you just asked me a super complicated question that's context dependent, right? It depends on what.
Give kind of like a gist, right? Like how do you get yourself back to center? We've all been in negotiations where in the moment you've got to, you go out of body and you got to get back to center and figure out how you're going to kind of move forward.
Okay, well, that really depends. Again, it depends on who you're with, what you're negotiating, and how off center you are. But if you need some time to relax, to collect yourself in terms of the focus of your negotiation, so then you need to call a break. But sometimes you can't just get up and say, "Hey, I'm having a break in this negotiation." That doesn't make any sense. Somebody will perceive weakness. But there's lots of ways out. You got somebody make a phone call to you. You could take a bio break.
Yeah.
That's totally natural. And nobody's going to say, "Hey, he didn't know what he was doing," or "He was way off in this ask." That's one way of doing it. That's a very classic way. Bio break time, or I'm really hungry. It's time to eat. I just want to go out and get something. I haven't eaten anything all day. I came to meet you, and I missed X, Y, and Z. Whatever you need to take the time. It's basically a time thing where you can reassess. If you need help during that negotiation, reach out to your advisors, just like you say. It's no big deal to put somebody on a cell phone for a few minutes and talk with them about something. Even a sophisticated negotiation, and that happens all the time, by the way.
Yeah.
And there are other things that you can do in the negotiation itself. You might have set it up so you have a foil. Let's say, what do I mean by that? Many times I've been in intense negotiations with somebody where I was floating the trial balloons, if you will, making the super asks.
Yeah.
Whether it be for a founder, negotiating an investment, or for a CEO negotiating with a board member, or usually in an M&A merger and acquisition transaction when you're negotiating for a management team, things are moving very quickly, and so sometimes the lawyers are there, particularly if they're good business lawyers. And I want to say a lot of lawyers are terrible and mess up deals, but if you know what you're doing, you can be the foil, and your own client can blame you for from making these asks that are unreasonable when the other side gets really upset and heated about it. And everybody knows intellectually that as a lawyer, you're not making an ask that's a great ask without having having your client approved it in advance. But psychologically, it's much easier to make the attorney the scapegoat, particularly one that's willing to be that in a negotiation, to lower the intensity of the negotiation. Everybody looks at you and says, that guy's an idiot. Why would he ask for something like that? Instead of having a breakdown. So, your question was complex. Then you wanted the gist of it. It really depends on who's there.
I think you gave great.
You have the way that I described, and so forth.
I think you gave great feedback and great things for people to think about, on how to create a pause and how to take a moment and how to take a break and how to maybe take a minute if you don't know what to do or how to answer something. You pause, you take a break, and however you do it, it's really up to you in the moment. But no, I think that's great. What about waiting for negotiations? Sometimes people, we're seeing a lot of people change jobs right now. We're seeing a lot of people, updating contracts with vendors and things of that nature. After you negotiate something, what's the wait time of follow-up? It used to be, whoever speaks first loses, right? So, but what's the, from your perspective as an expert in this field, talk post negotiation and follow up.
So if you're talking about after the contract is signed, I don't have a problem with following up right away. You've already done your deal. And it really depends on what deal you've done. All right. If you're talking about an employee, whether it's the CEO or the first level manager, you once you sign that contract and your employer signed it, you're now, metaphorically speaking, you're in bed now with the people who you just did a deal with. You need to start building the company and working for the company. So your follow-up is right away. If you're an entrepreneur and you've just taken an outside investment, you want to keep those investors happy. So you want to follow up with them right away, even if just to be a social thank you for investing, or we just raised X, you were a critical part of that. A lot of this is people interaction. You want to keep people happy there. If you've signed a deal as a company and you're the EVP of worldwide sales or something, you just closed the deal, $10 million deal, $20 million deal, presumably you've had some conversation with your principal on the other side, and then you follow up and have how happy you are to be going forward in this transaction. So if you're talking about after you've floated a trial balloon or in the middle of a negotiation where you think it's done but you haven't signed the contract, then you have a whole different art and sort of a science and an art of what you do to wait around so that you show strength and not weakness and so forth. But that's I'm not sure what you asked the question in which regard. But the latter one that I posited, where the contract yet hasn't been signed, that takes a lot more perspective. You need to really think about what happens next.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I love all the tips. Take me back and think community back on how Jotham Stein became, a negotiation guru.
Well, I totally fell into what I do now, which is represent entrepreneurs and executives and employees of all different levels at their companies, represent some companies as well, typically with founders who've had a hard time the first time, been forced out, and they say, never going to happen. I help them as they leave, and then they say, I don't want ever this to happen again. So how did I get into it? I got into it, I hung out my own shingle 25 plus years ago. I worked at a big firm, and people started referring me entrepreneurs, executives. I started out in Silicon Valley. I now have offices across the country, New York and Chicago as well. But I started out in Palo Alto, went to Stanford Law School. That's why I wound up in Palo Alto. And I was just lucky. It was there. This is still to this day, but certainly 25 years ago, plus years ago, there are entrepreneur after entrepreneur, and I've had the luck and to be able to represent people that are on the cutting edge of their companies, regardless of the technology or the area of company. And it's been a wonderful ride. But I started out totally by chance. In law school at Stanford Law School, if you told me I was going to be doing this, I would have been long odds against it. I probably even wouldn't have known what I would have been doing. So things happen fortuitously sometimes in life, and that's what happened with me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'd love to see you in the boardroom negotiating. When I interview you, I mean, it's so friendly. Not that you're not a friendly guy in the boardroom, but I'm sure there's a different level of intensity depending on what the negotiation is. And
well, yeah, that depends on what the negotiation is, right?
Yeah.
You always want to get to the result. But negotiations have life cycles, and they have different components. It depends on what you're negotiating for. It depends on who your client is. It depends on what the other side is. It depends on what the goals are.
Yeah.
Negotiations, some are very friendly, some are more intense, but the end result is to try to get to a deal of some sort.
Yeah.
And that's art and that's science, as you know.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a Detroiter, so I love on the back of your book, you have a testimonial from John J. Kelly of the Detroit Free Press. Negotiate Like a CEO is a tremendous resource and a book you must read if you aspire to be successful in business. Highly recommend. So, all right, let's do a quick speed round, Jotham. Since we last talked, any books that you've read that have had an impact on you?
No, I've been so busy since we talked at the end of September. I have not had the opportunity to read anything new.
All right.
And the book I mentioned last time is and the series of books will always be with me. And I take them everywhere in my mind and the experiences I had.
Which books?
That was I discussed the Lonely Planet books.
Yeah.
It was Africa on a shoestring in those days, and I described how I had hitchhiked around the world multiple times before I settled down.
Yeah.
And in those days, these days, because of marketing and every Lonely Planet and many of the other travel books, they have, one book for every country. In those days, they had one for like a continent. So that's what I started out with. And those experiences, I'll tell you, will be with me. And they help me negotiate because they're experiences with people that I've had so many years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, the world's changed a bit. I don't know if many people are hitchhiking around the world today than as they were maybe back in your day that you're talking about. If you could have coffee as you traveled the world, if you could have coffee with anybody living or dead, who would that be? And why?
Well, if I could have coffee with anybody wow, that's it. Living or dead? That I don't know how to answer that question. One part of me says, well, I'd like to have coffee with the president of the United States, right? And why? Because he's the head of the free world. He's probably the head of the entire world, and the information he has and the understanding he has about the world is something that would be spectacular to learn and be part of and understand. Just like I love to meet so many other kinds of people. Another part of me says, wow, I didn't even think of this, but if I had the opportunity, I guess I could sit down with Moses and ask him, what really happened and whether what's in the texts are accurate or not.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. And you could probably teach both of them a little bit about negotiation too along the way. Yeah. Jotham, best piece of wisdom one of your grandparents gave you?
Oh boy, I have such fond memories of my grandparents, but you're now going to catch me in a time I can't. I'm looking right now at something that came from my mother's father, so my grandfather, and it's an old radio from the 1930s, and I have such fond memories of him. And in fact, dedicated the book to his 4 children, one of whom my mother thankfully is still alive and doing very well. I spoke to her last night, and the other 3 have passed. But I close my eyes now, and I don't know that I can think of anything he said in particular, other than having such positive and fond memories.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when I think of my grandparents too, I try to think of lessons and things, but sometimes it's faster to pick up on just the energy that I carry of theirs versus sometimes like a piece of wisdom. So it sounds like you have that as well.
Yeah, I always think of it as honestly, what I think of is, it's not, he didn't say this to me. He was a good man.
Yeah.
And to try to be a good man and a really righteous soul, that's what you would always try to do in your life. Not that I'm so successful at it, but that's what I take with me rather than some words that he said.
Yeah. Good. I love it. Tell everybody where they can get your book, where they can connect with you, who your ideal clients are, Jotham.
You can get my book at Amazon.com, either in electronic version or in soft copy print. Be delivered if you by Prime the next day if you want. You type in the words "negotiate like a CEO," or you can type in my name, Jotham Stein. If you want to learn more about the book, you can go to the website for the book, which is negotiatelikeaceobook.com. And there you'll see a bio about me and about the book and some excerpts on the book. And you can press a button there to buy the book. It goes to Amazon. And there you can also contact me, because there's a contact page, and you can type into the contact page, and it will it goes through one of my assistants, but it gets to me.
Good.
My ideal client, I think, I don't know if you.
Yeah, go. I was going to ask you. Yeah.
As I said last time, are very interesting people that are on the cutting edge of what they're doing, and are nice people. And because I'm a lawyer, I like the clients that take direction or listen. They don't necessarily have to do everything I say, but at least they listen to everything and can articulate a reason why they might reject some of my advice. So those are the kind of thoughtful, interesting clients that I love the best.
I love it. Jotham, always a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks for sharing all of your tips and your wisdom about negotiating, and some additional stories about you. In community, I'm a business coach. I work with successful people who are stuck. I get them unstuck. And what I love about this podcast is I get to interview people like Jotham, who can also assist in my journey of helping you get unstuck. You said a lot, Jotham, today that resonated with me. But, I'll extract two things. One, which is everybody, work on your negotiation skills, right? So you can negotiate like a CEO. And two, just to kind of carry the energy of your grandfather, just be a good person, right? And because negotiating can get intense, but if your intent is always to stay in the good and the light, then I think you're going to get a lot further. So Think Community, thanks so much for tuning in. Jotham, thanks for being on the show. Think Community, you can buy Jotham's book, Negotiate Like a CEO, on Amazon.com. And you can reach me if you need anything at JonDwoskin.com. Jotham, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on Think Business Live, John.